So I understand there are a number of causes that can contribute to accidents or incidents, and why don't we start with cell phones? I think everybody has one. I have to admit, I am a person who believes that in stop-and-go traffic downtown with my hands free, I'm capable of operating a motor vehicle and a cell phone, and I guess I'm not.
Well, we'll start off with the choice of the word accident. The first thing we've got to remember is there is no such thing as an accident. So we won't call them accidents, or we'll try not to call them accidents. But the most dangerous thing that people do right now is use these gadgets while they're driving. There's about 160 studies that tell us that you cannot talk on a cell phone, whether it's hands held or hands free, and drive at the same time. Doing so is the equivalent to driving impaired. And it's not just the talking, but it's the text messaging, it's looking up the weather report, it's checking your shopping list, it's all the things that we do that are the distractors. What we're finding is that people that continue to do this are 4 to 6 times more likely to be involved in collisions. Their reaction time is reduced by about 20%. They're more likely to be involved in rear-end collisions. They're more likely to be involved in left-hand turn collisions. So when you go home tonight and you pick up that phone as you're driving, you've got to remember that by doing that, you're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to be involved in a collision by 4 to 6 times. And you can't cheat, because if the phone's in the car and it rings, you've been programmed since a baby that if it rings, you answer it. And if you're not going to answer it, at least you're going to look at call display to find out who it is.
All right, well, isn't that interesting? I bet I'm not alone in thinking that I'm somehow capable. I mean, these are very sobering stats, but we sort of have this programming that somehow we can do it. We can do all these things while we drive.
Well, we think we can, and when we're driving and we see someone that's driving erratically, that they look like they're driving impaired, and then you actually pull up beside them, and what they're doing is they're talking on their cell phone.
I can't be the only one who is transgressing the law of cell phone use and driving a motor vehicle. I'd really like to hear if anybody in the audience has any comments or questions about that.
Dr. Liu, I was wondering if you could explain the difference between using a hands-free or talking with another passenger that's in the vehicle with you, and how your risk might be increased in that way.
Well, that's a good question. There is a big difference between the conversation you have with a passenger as opposed to someone that you can't see. Because the passenger and you will adjust the conversation depending on the speed, the density of the traffic, how many vehicles there are, the kinds of maneuvers you're doing if you're on a very busy highway, and a lot of host of circumstances around that particular situation. As opposed to if you take a call from your teenage son who's just been involved in an injury or has just won a big award, or your boss is calling you because he's not happy with your performance, then you're focusing on the conversation. And that takes a lot of cognitive ability. Conversing with someone is very complicated. Conversing with someone that you don't see is very, very complicated. And so that's why the studies show us it makes no difference whether it's hands held or hands free. It's the conversation that's the distractor. And the conversation with a passenger is very different than a conversation with someone that you don't see.
Good question. Anyone else? Comments or questions about driving and cell phone use?
So, Dr. Liu, what do you say to the people that get lots of work done on the way home or the way to work, talking on their cell phone, as I'm sure we all do? Or say for a lot of Encana field employees, they're probably getting lots of work done driving to location and from location.
Well, there's a good study that just came out last year. AMEC, a big engineering firm worldwide, banned the use of cell phones within their organization, and a year later came back and asked their employees, did it have any impact on your productivity? And over 95% of the AMEC employees came back and said no, it had absolutely no impact. As a matter of fact, it made me a better employee because I'm less stressful, I plan my work better, and if I am taking those long trips, what I do now is I stop every hour to take a break, like they're supposed to, and catch up on my messages at the same time.
I just had a quick comment. I think it's really interesting that you relate talking on your cell phone while driving to being impaired, because I would never think of drinking and driving, and I would never get in my car and not put my seatbelt on, but I check my email, I talk on the phone, I'm a text messenger, and I've actually been driving and had incidents where I can't remember the last 20 or 30 seconds of the ride, so.
Yeah, and the thing you got to remember as well is there's some people that are driving from point A to point B, and they get to point B and they don't remember anything about the trip whatsoever. And so it's an addiction that we have to break, and unfortunately, it's a powerful addiction.
Dr. Liu, I have a question about some of our operational realities. Up in the north, we have a lot of one-way, two-way radio-controlled roads, and I'm trying to find a way to, think of a way that's safer for that to happen, because really the safety of those drivers depends on them calling their kilometers.
Yeah, and that's not a problem. And the reason that's not a problem is because exactly what you said. Those roads are controlled by calling in, but when you're calling in, it takes maybe 1 second, kilometer 42. That's not a conversation. So there's absolutely no study that shows that that's a distractor. As a matter of fact, I would probably be concerned if people weren't calling in their kilometers.
I know I find when I'm driving, I'm very distracted when a passenger is on the cell phone. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's the whole environment within the vehicle. And for young people, I think that sometimes they forget they're driving. The driver of a vehicle where there's a whole bunch of young people is really the host of a party. And the best example I can give you is I gave a talk at one of the local colleges, and a young female came up afterwards and said, Doc, you're absolutely right. I was 16, I just got my license, Mom lent me the van, I was so excited, we were all driving, it was my boyfriend's birthday, and I was so happy that it was the first month we were going out together, and I was text messaging him how much I loved him and the happy birthday, and she said I plowed into the car in front of me. And I said, well, that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. It's dangerous. She goes, no, Doc, it gets worse. And I said, well, how can it get any worse? She says, well, I was text messaging him. He was in the back seat. So that's the kind of stuff that's going on in these vehicles, is that they're sort of kind of party environments. And people are talking to each other on cell phones within the vehicle because it's so loud and they're text messaging, and nobody's concentrating on the driving. So quite frankly, I'm surprised that we're not killing ourselves at a greater rate given all the distractions that are in the vehicle today. But the cell phone is the one that you can actually control by putting down and leaving it alone. You get in the vehicle, the cell phone is off till you get out of the vehicle.